Hey, friends. How are you? I see Sammy and Christina. Actually, it looks like there's a lot of people here. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're going to finish our third book of My Father's Dragon, Elmer and the Dragon, and then we're finishing up with Dragons in Blueland tonight. How are y'all doing? Hey, Serena. How are y'all doing today? I did pigtails after our Zoom this morning. I don't know why. I just, for some reason, thought, let's do some pigtails. So what are y'all going to do for your history project, your Egypt project? Have you thought about it? Put any ideas into it? Serena, how's fourth grade going? I'm sure it's great. So, who else do we have here with us tonight? Hudson, if you're watching, Aunt Carrie loves you. So, not Ruby Lee, if you're watching, I love you. I miss you. So, just trying to give a shout out to all my viewers. If you're here, let me know you're here and I will give you a shout out. So, Jenna really, really, really wants to go swimming, but we don't have a swimming pool, so I'm trying to get that started for her. I know that's fun to do. I don't love to swim, but I love to be outside. Hey, Reed and Caroline are here. Hey, Reed. Hey, Caroline. Hope y'all had a great day today. We're about to get started. We finished yesterday with Elmer packing the knapsack to head back to Blueland in the mountains to rescue the dragon family. Remember that the dragons are actually very gentle, but mankind has said that they are fierce and ferocious, and the knights would attack them. So we also learned that all of Boris's sisters are a green color, a solid color, and that all of the brothers have some kind of pattern, either stripes, vertical or horizontal, or polka dots or something of that nature. So the boys are patterned and the girls are solid green of different hues. Elmer is worried. No, actually, Boris is kind of worried that he's been gone for 2 days and that he's worried that his family is not going to be safe. So we're going to pick up with chapter 8, To Spiky Mountain Range. Okay, so that must be a part of the mountain range in Blueland. So here we go. Where are we going to rest tomorrow? Asked Elmer, biting off a corner of a chocolate bar to help him stay awake. I'm trying to get all the way to Spiky Mountain Range, said the dragon. No more Mr. Wagon Wheel for me if I can help it. He's an awful... A searchlight, interrupted Elmer as a beam of light shot up from below, lighting up the dragon's gold-colored wings. It's from that ship, Elmer. They saw me last night, too. Hold on tight. I'm going to try to dodge it, yelled the dragon, swooping, diving up and down, swerving from side to side. Elmer grabbed the dragon's head and held on as hard as he could. He didn't dare open his eyes, but he could hear men shouting on the boat or on the ship. Right, move it to the right, faster, faster. Left now. Hey, I think something's riding whatever it is. Looks like a boy, shouted another man. And then the moon slipped behind a cloud bank. The dragon escaped the beam of light and flew frantically through the darkness while the light danced over the sky, still looking for them. So they're trying to dodge the beam that's coming from the light on the ship because he's been spotted again. Good work, said Elmer, feeling very dizzy and quite sick. Ooh. But they saw us, both of us, moaned the dragon. That's all right. They don't know where we're going, and we'll have your whole family rescued by the time they decide what we are, said Elmer, wondering if it would be wiser to finish eating his chocolate bar then or later. He was still feeling sickish. I hope you're right, muttered the dragon doubtfully. On and on they flew until at dawn they were over Seaweed Bay and due east lookout. The dragon swung westward over Seaweed City and landed in a forest on Spiky Mountain Range. He was so tired that he fell asleep before he had time for a drink of water. Elmer finished his chocolate bar, ate another, and a whole box of Fig Newtons. And then he drank from the mountain stream and curled up beside the sleeping dragon. I love chocolate bars, and I kind of like Fig Newtons. It's been a long time since I've had Fig Newtons, but I used to eat them a lot as a kid. Luckily, they didn't know who had seen them over Seaweed City. Ever since Mr. Wagon Wheel had glimpsed the dragon Thursday, he had been trying to persuade his neighbors that he really had seen a blue demon. No one believed a word of his story, but he had bothered the whole town so much that they told him to report it to Seaweed City Police. He had planned to go on Sunday, but changed his mind in the middle of Saturday night. He woke Mrs. Wagon Wheel. You take care of the morning milking, and I'll be back in time for dinner. I'm taking the horse and the wagon. But, said Mrs. Wagon Wheel. I'm off, said Mr. Wagon Wheel, and Mrs. Wagon Wheel heard the kitchen door slam behind him. So at dawn, just as he was trotting through the outskirts of Seaweed City, Mr. Wagon Wheel looked up into the sky to see what sort of a day it was going to be, and he nearly fell out of his seat. The blue demon, he screamed, with a boy or something riding on its back. He looked around wildly for someone to show it to, but nobody was in sight. And by the time he reached the police station and had found someone to listen to him, Elmer and the dragon were safely hidden in the forest of Spiky Mountain Range. So Mr. Wagon Wheel sees him again and has no one to show him to. And luckily, Elmer and Boris have made it to the mountain range. That's the end of chapter 8. Here comes chapter 9. And it is called Blueland. And look at this picture. They're all snuggled up together. Elmer and the dragon dozed on until late afternoon. They were both impatient to be off, but as Elmer said, we'd only spoil everything by getting there before it's dark enough. So they waited and rested and drank cool mountain water. The dragon munched ferns while Elmer ate his third chocolate bar. I can't stand it any longer, said the dragon, jumping up and shaking out his wings. All right, said Elmer, let's go. He put on his knapsack and climbed onto the dragon's back. They walked to a clearing in the woods, and the dragon took off across awful desert. It was hot over the sands, even in the late afternoon, and Elmer crouched over to hide from the burning winds. The dragon panted for air, but flew faster and faster, hardly daring to think what might have happened since he left. He kept muttering, if only the sandstorms would start up. Where are the sandstorms? That would make the men leave us alone. When they came to the dry rocky slopes of Blueland, the sun was low on the horizon, and they knew it would soon be dark inside the circle of mountains. Keep a sharp lookout, warned the dragon, as they picked their way through the boulders. They may have men most anywhere. Up they went, slowly and quietly, and at last they reached the gap between the peaks, and Elmer gasped at the sight below him. The beautiful meadows of Blueland shone bright green, dotted with patches of snapdragons glowing white in the dimming light. And at the center, the lake water reflected the pink sky. And suddenly it was gone into darkness as the sun set. But the dragon had been straining to see across the lake, and suddenly he grabbed Elmer for joy. The men! I saw the men, and they were still standing outside the cave with the net. Maybe we're not too late. He hurried Elmer down to the giant snapdragon bush, which hid the entrance to the little tunnel. I don't think they found it, he whispered happily as he pulled aside the roots and the rocks. Neither do I, agreed Elmer, looking all around to be sure he'd remember the spot. And then he took off his knapsack and unpacked one whistle, one horn, the flashlight, and the ball of string. Lower your neck so I can measure the strings for your whistle and horn, he said, getting out his jackknife. Very creative, Elmer. Why do I have to have them on strings? Asked the dragon. I don't want you to drop them. If the men never see them, maybe they'll never guess what happened. The dragon laughed and tried out the strings to make sure he could reach the horn and whistles easily. They're fine, he said. Now I'll wait here until you tell me it's time. Look, the men are building a campfire. They must be having supper. So much the better, said Elmer as he started down into the tunnel with his knapsack. But how will your family know that I'm your friend? Tell them Boris sent you. Boris? Is that your name? Yes, said Boris uncomfortably. I was embarrassed to tell you before. It's no worse than Elmer, said Elmer. I suppose not, and it's certainly not so bad as some in my family. I might as well tell you the rest. My sisters are Ingeborg, Eustacia, Gertrude, Bertha, Mildred, and Hildegard. And my brothers are Emil, Horatio, Conrad, Jerome, Wilhelm, Dagobert, and Egmont. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? But hurry, I can't wait to hear what's been happening to them all. Have you heard any of those names? Well, obviously we've heard of Conrad. He's at our school. But the rest of those names are quite old and traditional. Once inside the tunnel, Elmer snapped on his flashlight and shot it over the damp walls. The ceiling was high enough so he could walk easily. Down, down, down he went, around curves, through small rooms, and then more narrow tunnels until at last he came to the place where the dragon had got stuck. He heard scratching and scraping noises, and he knew he must be very close to the dragon family. It's Elmer Elevator, Boris's friend, he whispered as bravely as he could. Who? So here we go. He's shining his flashlight through, and there's the family waiting and waiting. They look like they've been safe, so that's good. The men outside have not found them. Elmer Elevator, Boris's friend. Boris is out at the entrance to the tunnel, and I've come to rescue you. Turn off your light and come in, whispered another voice, and Elmer walked slowly into the darkness. Would you be able to walk into a whole room full of dragons? Eek! Elmer walked into the darkness. He stopped, and he felt himself surrounded by huge forms breathing excitedly. We can't tell you how grateful we are, said the gigantic dragon mother. Never mind that, whispered the father. What's your plan, and how can we help? We're almost starved to death. Oh, have some chocolate bars, said Elmer, generously giving away his last 3. Here, I'll open them up for you and divide each one into 5 pieces. I'm afraid it's not much, but it ought to help a little. He held his flashlight inside the knapsack and divided up the chocolate as he explained his plan. They all chuckled low dragon chuckles and began to feel much better. And then Elmer made string necklaces for horns and whistles for all the dragons and carefully tied them on. He wanted to take a really good look at the tremendous family, but they were near the entrance to the cave and he had to keep the flashlight in the knapsack. As he took out his cat pistol, he asked, Do you know how heavy the net is? and how it's fastened across the entrance? No, answered the dragon father. Well, I'd better look, said Elmer. He quietly crept up toward the net, but the men were sitting close by, and he didn't dare get near enough to see it well. We'll have to trust to luck, he told the dragons as he started back through the tunnel to Boris. There's one of the horns and one of the whistles. And they're tying them around the dragons' necks. Wonder whatever they could be doing with that. Chapter 10, Escape. That's a snapdragon plant that he's standing beside. Boris, whispered Elmer from under the snapdragon bush. Are they all right? What happened? Nothing's happened. Everyone's all right, and we're ready to go. I couldn't see the net, but we'll hope for the best. Did you say one of the men is called Frank? Yes, I heard them mention a Frank and an Albert. Good. I'll meet you here afterwards. I told your family you'd have to take me back and that you'd find them near here someplace. Fine, said the dragon. I can't wait. All right now, I'm going back. Remember, as soon as you hear my cap pistol the third time, you're to make as much noise with the horn and whistle as you possibly can. Elmer turned back down into the tunnel and hurried to the big cave. Everyone was ready. Boris will be your signal, he explained. As soon as you hear him blowing his horn and whistle, you'll all blow as hard as you can in every direction. I'll yell Boris when it's time to charge, but look carefully at the net before you try to pass by. I don't know where the opening will be. Ready? Whispered Elmer, his heart pounding so hard he was sure it must echo through the cave. Ready, whispered the 15 waiting dragons. Elmer crept up close to the net. The men were unrolling blankets and getting ready for the night. There was no moon. Perfect, thought Elmer. He took out his cap pistol and fired it once, and then, Help! Help! He cried in a gruff voice. Get me out of here! I'm trapped! The men jumped up, tripping all over their blankets and bumping into one another. What was that? Somebody's in the cave! Frank! Albert! Help! Help! Yelled Elmer again. Come on, let's hurry, said the men, and they began moving great boulders off the edge of the net. So that's how they fastened down the bottom, thought Elmer. That should make it easy. And then he shot off his pistol again and cried, They got me! Help! The men frantically rolled away the boulders, just as they began pulling aside the heavy net. Elmer shot off the pistol for the third time and ran back into the cave. Boris heard the third shot and began blowing his whistle and horn and running up and down over the meadow. As the noise echoed over the lake, the 15 trapped dragons started in on their whistles and horns. This must have been crazy. Noise roared wildly through the cave, back and forth across the lake, and echoed madly around the circle of mountains. Some of the men had started off when they heard Boris. The others, who had been about to rescue Elmer, ran out of the cave in terror. Elmer shouted, Boris! And raced back through the tunnel. The 15 dragons surged toward the entrance, found where the men had pulled aside the net, and poured through the opening, trampling out the campfire as they came. Into the sky they zoomed, still blowing their whistles and horns. And then they disappeared. Into the darkness, leaving 13 men scattered over the meadows where they had fled, and 3 men sitting in the lake water where they had jumped. So the net has been pushed aside, and here we have the men running and jumping into the lake, and we have them flying out, blowing their horns and whistles to cause as much crazy chaos as possible. So there we go. So they've escaped into the darkness. And here we have, I'm going to guess this is probably Frank and Albert talking to each other, wondering what could have ever happened. What happened? Said Frank to Albert. So much chaos. And we're starting the last chapter. Chapter 11 of our trilogy is coming to an end. The Dragon Affair. So now, all that's left is for people to talk about what just happened. Elmer ran up to the tunnel to Boris, and away they flew long before the noise had stopped echoing among the mountains. Well, that's that, said Elmer, panting for breath and reaching for his second box of Fig Newtons. Gosh, Elmer, I can't thank you enough, said the dragon. Never mind that. I never had so much fun in my life. But you'll have to hurry me back to Seaweed City. I've got to take the train home as soon as possible. Over the desert they flew, and the wind grew stronger and stung Elmer's face. I think a storm's a-coming, said the dragon. I can smell the sand in the air. Wonderful, cried Elmer. The men will have to leave Blueland, and maybe you'll never be bothered again. Over Spiky Mountain Range they sped, reaching the outskirts of Seaweed City at midnight. How about leaving you on top of the monument? Suggested the dragon. Then I won't have to land on the ground. Fine, said Elmer, and the dragon glided onto the top of Seaweed City Monument overlooking the center of the city. Goodbye for the last time, said Elmer. I'm sorry that I never really got to see your family. They must be magnificent. But tell them for me that nobody will ever know more about them than they do right now, except for our old friend, the old alley cat. I'll tell her all about it. Goodbye. I'd better be hurrying home, too, sobbed the happy baby dragon. He clumsily hugged Elmer, and off he flew. This is their final goodbye. And Elmer has said he won't tell anyone about the dragon family except for the old alley cat. And we know the old alley cat's not going to tell anyone. Elmer finished up the Fig Newtons, saving one box for the train, and climbed down the monument. Quickly, he walked to the railroad station and asked for a ticket to Nevergreen City. Isn't it rather late for a boy of your size to be taking the train alone? Asked the ticket agent. I suppose so, answered Elmer, giving the man $7.27. The man shrugged his shoulders and handed Elmer a ticket. I can't get used to boys these days, he muttered. By the way, there's a train in 20 minutes. Gets you down in Nevergreen at noon. Thanks, said Elmer, jingling the 9 cents he had left in his pocket, as if he were used to taking trains in the middle of the night. When the train thundered into the station, Elmer climbed aboard. What are you doing, running away from home? Asked the conductor suspiciously. Oh, no, sir. On the contrary, I'm on my way there now, said Elmer, looking the conductor straight in the eye. Have it your own way, said the conductor, punching the ticket. Elmer slept right through to Nevergreen City. He walked up the front steps of his home just as his mother was making herself some lunch. Elmer, Elmer, you're back, but you look half-starved. I am, said Elmer, hugging his mother and sitting down at the table. He ate 3 bowls of tomato soup, 5 slices of pumpernickel bread, 4 glasses of milk, 6 fried eggs, and 2 huge pieces of sponge cake. That's a lot of food. And then he went to talk to the cat. So here he is talking to the ticket man, and then here is the conductor. I do think it's strange that a young boy would be traveling at night by himself. The last couple of pages. Let's see if I can get there. This is what's about to happen. Conversation with Elmer and the cat. It wasn't until the next morning that the Dragon Affair came out in the Nevergreen City News. Listen to this, yelled Mr. Elevator, reading aloud at breakfast. A fantastic and unexplainable escape took place in the night in the great high mountains of Blueland late Sunday night. 15 dragons, a wonder in themselves, as they had long been believed extinct. And the news story went on to tell about the brave men who had fought their way back through treacherous sandstorms, to tell the most momentous story of our time. Unbelievers who doubt this story, continued Mr. Elevator, reading aloud from the paper, will find it difficult to dismiss the following supporting evidence of the presence of dragons in this region. And then he proceeded to read about a ship stationed off the coast of Popsicornia, which twice had stationed off the coast of Popsicornia, had twice sighted a strange flying beast, once with a boy atop it. And about a certain Mr. Wagon Wheel, who claimed also to have seen it twice, once on the ground near his farm and once in the air with a boy aboard over Seaweed City. And about Chester DeWitt, a small boy who also claimed he'd seen the dragon over the city the preceding Thursday evening. Lastly, there was a short bit about the conductor and the ticket agent who wondered if the boy they had seen late Sunday night could have had anything to do with the case. And so on and so on. Mr. Elevator dropped the paper and stared at Elmer. Do you have anything to do with all of this? I just don't understand your strange trips away from home. Me? Said Elmer, choking on a piece of toast. Why, Father, you don't mean you really believe all that nonsense, do you? The end. There he is. Father has read this most momentous story of dragons and a young boy. And Elmer just looked at his dad and said, you don't really believe all of that, do you? Ding dong. Another book is done. Actually, this is 3 books. So wonderful. So we're done with the trilogy of Elmer and the Dragon. Tomorrow we will start The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, one of my favorites. So have a great evening. 2nd grade, I will see you tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock because tomorrow morning I will be at the school with our seniors. And so tomorrow night at 7, we will begin our new book. I love you. Have a great evening, and I will see you soon. Enjoy your time tonight. Blessings. Goodbye.